Hello everyone. This is Julia Disasarocha. I am an associate broker and the team leader with Julia and Associates team for eXp Realty. And I wanted to record this monthly report for April. I feel like we're all going through very difficult times very unusual times. And it is very important for us to stay informed and know what is going on in the world and how this situation of coronavirus, COVID-19, will affect us, our families, and our businesses. Today I received the report from Keep It Current. It is the leading technology company that is analyzing the data from all the sources and providing an update for us as realtors on what is going on and what we should be ready for. So this time I will be sharing the screen, my computer screen. I will start this video broadcast. I want to hear this information directly from the source so that you can make the informed decision for yourself. If you are thinking about buying or selling a home, you will know what direction to go now. I'm talking to a lot of buyers and sellers on a daily basis, just reaching out to them right now and asking how they're doing, if they need any help. And most common questions that people asking me, like, Julia, are we going to another recession? Is it going to be something like we went through in 2008 or 2009? And when the economy is going to recover, how long would it take? So let's watch this video together. And if later on you will have any additional questions, you can certainly reach out to me and I will be happy to help. I will be also sending the recording of this video to all my database, to all the buyers, sellers. So if you would like to receive the copy of the report plus like extensive analysis of the market condition, I will be glad to send it to you. Just call or text me. You can reach me at 404-886-0566. Okay, I'm about to share my computer screen and we will get started. Here you go.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen, this is Steve Harney with the April edition of KCM's Monthly Market Report. Now let's get started, and boy, what a month it's been. Instead of giving you a report like we normally do, we've decided to make it the top 5 questions we must be able to answer right now in the market. That's crucial to us right now. It's crucially important that as we're getting the questions that are causing the concern, the confusion, the fear in the market, that we have really good answers to that. Now, here's the bad news. You're not going to get any of that out of last month's monthly market report, because you could take last month's monthly market report and throw it out. At the beginning of March, we were talking about having a sensational year. It wound up that January and February, we sold more houses in this country than any other January and February in more than a decade. So we were in for a real prime phenomenal year, and then bam, everything gets put on hold. So let's go over the questions that you're going to be asked, and let's go over the answers so that you have them. The 5 questions that agents are telling us, that loan offers around, anyone in the housing industry are coming at us with, is: when is the economy going to recover? Are we going into a recession? Is this going to be like 2008 all over again? What about all those job losses? And what should you do right now? All right, what's the actual steps that you should take forward? So let's start with, when is the economy going to recover? Ladies and gentlemen, understand that what just happened is there was, on the American economy, someone hit the pause button. Now, this is not like 2008, and David, who's with me today, will go ahead and explain that to you. All right, But what I'm telling you, in 2008 was like a tornado. It came rushing through, destroyed all the buildings, leveled everything right to the foundation. When that tornado passed through, we had to rebuild all those buildings. It took years to rebuild that town. Just like it took years after 2008 to rebuild the housing market and rebuild the mortgage market even more so. What we're going through right now is like a snowstorm. There's 6 feet of snow on the ground and it's still snowing. But eventually the snow's going to stop. And after that, the snow that's there is going to melt. All the buildings are still intact. And I'm not saying we're going to go right back to the way it was immediately, but it's not going to take us long. We don't have to rebuild anything. We just have to get back to work. So there's a big difference between those two. Another analogy I like to use for the older people on the call, remember the VCR? We used to have this little cassette, when we plug it in, we couldn't stream movies. We actually had to buy a cassette with the movie on it. Well, if we use that metaphor going back, or analogy going back to 2008, someone took that VCR and smashed it with a sledgehammer. And it took us a long time to put it back together again, the electrical wiring and everything. This time around, we were watching a movie, somebody hit the pause button. As soon as they let us hit the play button, there's no restructuring. We just have to get back to work. So I want to let you know when that time will probably happen. So we've done some research. We got the forecast from Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, and Morgan Stanley. They're all saying the same thing. We're in for a wild ride over the next 90 days, the second quarter of this year, but we're also in for a wild ride up to the rest of the year. So if you look at the graph right here, you can see that every one of the major financial institutions that we have on the graph agree that that's exactly what's going to happen. We're going to have what they call a V type of recovery. Strong down, strong up. Like if you took a tennis ball and threw it as hard as you could against the ground, it would bounce right back up again. And everyone's agreeing to that, and that's the good news. All right. As a matter of fact, John Burns Consulting has actually done analysis on this. This is a quote from their research team. Historical analysis showed us that pandemics are usually V-shaped, the pandemic we're in right now. Sharp recessions that recover quickly enough to provide little damage to home prices. And some very cutting-edge search engine analysis by our information management team showed the current slowdown is playing out similarly thus far. So John Burns Consulting, a major consulting firm in the real estate industry, has studied past pandemics, and they're saying it's going to be a V-shaped, and it's not going to impact housing prices dramatically. All right. Behind that, we just saw that Harvard Business Review just put out a paper saying it's worth looking back at history to place the potential impact path of COVID-19 empirically. In fact, V-shapes monopolize the empirical landscape of prior shocks, including epidemics such as SARS, the 1968 H3N2, known as the Hong Kong flu, and the 1958 H2N2, known as the Asian flu, and the 1918 Spanish flu. So in each of those cases, where there was major pandemics, there was a V-shaped return in the economy. So I want everyone to feel comfortable that, yeah, we're on a wild ride down. We have to buckle in for the next 90 days. But after that, we have to be prepared for a wild ride up. And remember, in our industry, we're not like the restaurant business. We don't lose any meals. Every night, each one of us sits down with our family and eats a meal. That's one meal that restaurant will never recoup. All the people in our industry that are thinking about selling the house or thinking about buying a house, they're just delayed. They've been put on pause. And they're going to come out when this thing ends on the other side. So we have to be prepared not only to handle the business that would normally come, let's say in July, August, and September, but we also have to handle the backup of business that will be coming from, part of March, April, May, and June. All right. So we're going to get flooded with business on the other side of this, and we have to keep ourselves active right now and in touch with those people so that when the time comes, when they hit that play button again, we're ready to go. Now, because of this major drop in the GDP expected in this quarter, there's going to be a lot of recession talk. Understand that shouldn't scare you. Recession does not equal housing crisis. As a matter of fact, Doug Bryan, the CEO from Mirrored Property Management, said this recently: with the exception of two recessions, the Great Recession from 2007 to 2009 and the Gulf War recession from 1990 to 1991, no other recessions have impacted the U.S. housing market, according to Freddie Mac Home Price Index data collected from 1975 to 2018. So they did research and they found out that, you know what? Recessions normally don't impact the housing market. And of course, we have the next graph that we explained that, you know, it's true in 2008, you've seen this graph before, in 2008, because the housing market and the mortgage market meltdown had a major impact on the economy, prices fell 19.7%. But just like the research done on the Freddie Mac Home Price Index, this is on the CoreLogic National Home Price Index, and they found the same exact thing, that 3 of the last 4 recessions, it didn't have a dramatically negative impact. As a matter of fact, only one did it go down, and it was only by 2%. And 3 of the other 3 recessions, they actually went up twice rather nicely. So I think that what we're looking at right now is we're in really good shape, but you have to explain that to the customer. So right now, what I want to do is I want to hand the baton off to David Childers. David Childers is the vice president of our company, of KCM, and he's got a long history on the financial side of this, where, you know, KCM came with a long history on the real estate side of it. He's got a long history on the financial side. To be honest with you, he helped me dramatically during the 2008 crisis. He was by my side, giving me consultation every single day on the things I didn't understand. And I tried to hire him for 10 years. Luckily, 2 years ago, he finally caved in and he came aboard, and I'm really happy to have him. And we should, as being members of our program, we're all very lucky to have David here. So David, I'm going to turn the ball over to you.
Thanks, Steve. And that question that you led off with, is this going to be 2008 again, is the question that's on a lot of consumers' minds. And I want to start with a quote from Mark Fleming, the chief economist at First American. It says, "Many still bear scars from the Great Recession and may expect the housing market to follow a similar trajectory in response to the coronavirus outbreak. But there are distinct differences that indicate the housing market may follow a much different path. And while housing led the recession in 2008 and 2009, this time it may be poised to bring us out of it." So what do we know there? We know that in 2008 and 2009, our business was at the epicenter of the downturn, of the economic slowdown. And what we know today, entering into this year, the strength of the housing market is well positioned to bring us out of it. So our research team went back and took a look at the housing crash of 2008 and the stock market correction, and we found some interesting things. When we look back to 2008, we can see that the S&P went through a correction of about 51%. And through that time in 2007, 8, and 9, home prices depreciated as well, really over the 3-year period, a cumulative depreciation of about just under 20%. And that's what we remember. That's what consumers, anybody that lived through this in our business, we remember that. And yet, when we start to take a look at what's happening today and what you just shared, Steve, we start to see a little bit different picture. And I want to share this quote from economist Dave Rosenberg. And it says, "What 9/11 has in common with what is happening today is that this shock has also generated fear, angst, and anxiety among the general public. And people avoided crowds then as they believed another terrorist attack was coming, and are acting the same today to avoid getting sick. The same parts of the economy are under pressure: airlines, leisure, hospitality, restaurants, entertainment, consumer discretionary services in general." Very similar, what David's saying there, very similar to what we're seeing today, where people our economy, like Steve said, had been put on pause as people are sheltering in place during this time. So when we take the same approach to the dot-com and 9/11 crash, we see a different picture. We see an S&P correction during that time of about 45%. But during the same time in 2000, 2001, and 2003, we actually see home price appreciation during that time. So a very different picture from 2008 than what we saw in 9/11. So this really, forces us to look at what is different today, or how is today's market compared to 2008. And I want to take a couple of comparisons here and start off with home price appreciation. When we look back to 2008, the 6 years leading up to the housing crash, we know we had high appreciation. And when we look at the 6 years leading up to today, we see we're nowhere near where we were during that time. Really, the highest year in the last 6 years is not even equal to the lowest year leading up to the housing crash. And while prices are rising, what we don't have is runaway appreciation. Important to remember in this visual. The next thing we want to look at is mortgage credit availability. How easy is it to get a loan? And we use the Mortgage Credit Availability Index from the Mortgage Bankers Association each month to measure that. And what we know, the taller the graph, the easier it is to get a loan. So what we see is on the left side of this graph, the Mortgage Credit Availability Index at the time of the housing bubble. We know it was high, and we see where it is today, nowhere near where it was pre-crash, because we know at that time this pendulum swung back in credit requirements and what it took to get a loan. That made it much harder for people to qualify. So something important that we want to look at as we compare these two markets. Next, let's talk about inventory. Entering this year, the biggest challenge we were prepared for in the housing industry was inventory. Literally not enough homes on the market for the number of people that wanted to buy those. So if we take a balanced market of 6 months and we look back to 2007, we know there were just over 8 months of supply of inventory on the market, leading us to above 6 months being a buyer's market and below 6 months being a seller's market. So today we're at 3.1 months of inventory on the market. We literally don't have a oversupply of homes on the market for people that want to buy them. Much different. Oversupply led to the issues that we went into in 2008 and faced as an industry. The next thing we want to look at is really home equity and how consumers are using their equity then and now. And this gives a really good picture of 2008 and the 3 years leading up to 2008. You see on the left side here, $824 billion was cashed out as cash out refis during that time. And we know the 3 years leading to today, that number is $232 billion, a fraction of what it was back then. Back then, people were using their homes almost as an ATM, taking equity out of their homes, putting it into appreciating assets, buying vacations, going on trips, doing things, financing lifestyle, thinking this is never going to end. This shows you how consumers are treating equity today, and it's very different than 2008. What we also know is that 53.8% of all the homes in this country have at least 50% equity. We know that because 37% of the homes are owned free and clear. And then when you take the remaining homes, 26.7% of those have at least 50% equity, which gives us this number of 53.8% of homes have equity. A very different position than 2008. In 2008, when we had homes leveraged to the hilt, that home loses a little bit of value and you literally owe more on the home than what it's worth. People walk away. People aren't walking away today with the equity they have in their homes. If they have $50,000 or $100,000 of equity in their home, they're going to stay there. And they're treating their homes very, very differently than what we saw in 2008. The next thing I want to look at is the percent of median income needed to purchase a median end priced home. And what we know pre-bubble is that number was a lot higher than what it was today. Back in 2006, 25%, just over 25% of someone's income was dedicated to their home and their housing need. Today, that number is just under 15% of income dedicated to the housing need. And we know, again, a very different picture. But really, as we look at all these things to compare 2008 to today, another big question, Steve, that I know we want to hop into is unemployment and about all the job loss that's out there.
David, thank you very much. I really appreciate, you really explaining the differences between 2008 and, what it's like today. And I want everyone on this particular monthly market report to understand, you have to get this word out. There's a lot of confusion out there. There are a lot of people doomsday sayers, Chicken Little saying the sky is falling. Let's get as much of this information out as we possibly can. But I do want to be real frank that we do have one challenge and that's the job loss. 10 million people lost their jobs the 2 weeks before we made this recording. And we're recording this right now on Tuesday, April 7th. So we can take a look at the graph and see that, my God, like compared to any other time in American economic history, going all the way back prior to 1970, we can see that this is just a different time. Now, I want to take a look at those numbers in a little deeper context. The numbers you're seeing with the red graph going all the way up, that's from the U.S. Labor Department, and that's the number of unemployment claims. So there's a number of people that have unemployment claims, and that is almost to the day. So when they say week of March 22nd to March 28th, they're almost caught up at that point in time, and they're giving you that information. I'm going to show you another graph in a second that's going to actually not be from the Labor Department, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, another governmental branch, that then takes the information that they get from people collecting the unemployment insurance and gives us some analysis of that information. The challenge with any analysis, it's not as quick to market. So the graph I'm about to show you actually didn't take place, did not count many of those 10 million. As a matter of course, the study on the people collecting unemployment was done on the week of March 14th. At that point in time, 701,000 people had already lost their job, nowhere near the 10 million. But I do want to break down the 701,000. Who were those people? Because that will give us some sign as to how quickly they'll come back to work. We don't know if this is going to be reflective of the new analysis that the Bureau of Labor Statistics was going to bring on May 8th, but we'll get that to you and let you see what the differences are. But right now, this is what, of the first 700,000, let's take a look at who they are. Number one, 59.5% are food service and drinking places, meaning the servers and bartenders. When the restaurants open back up, all of them go back to work immediately. Starting at the bottom, construction workers. The new construction was finally starting to take off, and all of a sudden, bam, they got hit with, supply chain issues and everything else. Those people will be back to work. Healthcare office workers. I'm saying, how could healthcare workers have a challenge? No, those are all the people that are working in the doctor's office, in the dentist's office. They're all going to go back to work. We're going to need dentistry. We're still going to need to go to the doctor. Child care workers. Well, we know, now that if we have to spend 3 months or 2 months with our kids, we're definitely going to want to get the child care workers back to work. We'll probably pay them double if we have to. Temporary help services. Well, obviously, if a business not working, all the people that work in the temporary services to help that business staff itself, they're gone. Retail trade, all the stores are closed. Once they open back up, those people come back in. And the accommodation industry, the hotel industry. And obviously, they might not rush right back in, but they'll be back in. All the other jobs not in those categories make up 9.8% of the 701,000 that were originally laid off. So we can see that the vast majority, over 90%, they kind of look like they're going to get their jobs right back. But again, this report was done on March 14th. So it doesn't include the second half of March, and many of the 10 million were in the second half. Will they be the same type of workers? No, not exactly. But we will give you that. That data will not be out until May 8th. But the day that data breaks, we'll get a graph just like this to you so we see exactly who were those 10 million people. But understand, they're going to come back to work. The vast majority of the people laid off are going to come back to work, and we'll go back to the V type of recovery. They all lost their jobs on the way down, and most of them are going to get their jobs on the way up. But it's going to be ugly. The headlines are going to be ugly about the unemployment rate on May 8th. Actually, the May 8th, the unemployment rate will come out. It will be ugly. The Labor Department's numbers of how many people are losing, collecting unemployment, that number is still going to be ugly. All right? So just be prepared for those headlines. But I want to also prepare for us coming back. So I'm looking at Goldman Sachs unemployment rate projections. They're projecting that for this year, the height of the number is going to be 15%. There are a lot of projections, ladies and gentlemen. JP Morgan thinks it's going to be 8.5%. The Congressional Budget Office thinks it's going to be 12%. But I wanted to take one of the more dire projections so we can prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So what they're saying going forward, the unemployment rate is going to hit 15% this year. It'll be somewhere between 6 and 8% next year, down to 5%, down to 4% over the next couple of years. So it's nowhere near what we originally thought it would be, and nowhere near what some people are saying, like this is going to be the Great Recession all over again. We'll cover that in a slide in a second. But first, I want to just almost kill a myth that maybe even I had, that I wasn't sure about, that I think almost everyone believes. And that's that the unemployment rate has a major impact on the number of sales done on an annual basis. So we put a graph together. I want you to take a look at this graph going all the way back to 1989. And what we see is there is no direct relationship between the unemployment rate and the number of houses sold. And we give you 3 instances of that. First, in the early 1990s, the unemployment rate went up to 7.5%. Home sales continued to increase. In the early 2000s, the unemployment rate went up to 6%. And guess what? Home sales continued to increase somewhat dramatically. Then the third one, when the housing crash occurred, the unemployment rate shot up to 9.6%. And yes, home sales fell. And I'm sure that had a major piece to do with it. But also understand that was also the time when the banks, as David showed you earlier in the mortgage availability index, just shut off lending. Remember how it came flying down, the ability for someone to get a mortgage? So if you remember, those who were in the business in 2008, we had a lot of customers that we knew were mortgageable, but yet they couldn't get a mortgage. The banks were so tight in their new standards. So we're going to try to take a look and try to figure out if we could put that in there. We're going to try to say, for that period of time, if we blow that up and overlay the the mortgage availability index, maybe that will give us a clearer picture of that time. Okay, but be patient for that. The team back at the office is trying to do all of that stuff right now. Now, the fourth we want to take a look at, for the last many years, the unemployment rate has been dropping like a rock. But look at home sales. They remain flat. So really, there's not a direct correlation. Now, I understand that 15% is different than 9.6%. I understand that it could have an effect, and we'll look at that effect as we look at how many people, in fact, do lose their jobs, and we'll look at who those people are and how quickly can you get those jobs back. But this comparison to doomsday projections of this is going to be a Great Depression again, all over again, we did the research, the team did the research, and this is what they're showing us. In the Great Depression, look at the unemployment rates for 6 years. 4 of those 6 years, it was over 20%. Now remember, in the graph we showed you before, when the unemployment rate went up to 7.5, it did not. That number did not impact home sales. Home sales continue to rise. So if we use 8% as the barometer, anything over 8%, there could be a challenge. Then we can see in the Great Recession, we had 3 years in a row of over 8% unemployment. And that definitely was a challenge. But if we look at the projections from Goldman Sachs, and again, they have probably the most conservative projections. They think it's going to be a little bit more difficult than most people think. But even if we use those dire projections, what we're looking at is, yeah, we're going to have a tough time this year. All right, we're going to have to come out the other side, and the people who do have jobs, and even if it is a 15% unemployment rate, remember 85% of the people will still have jobs. Remember, of that 15% that don't, some of those people were never going to buy a house anyway, because that includes the 16-year-old that is working at McDonald's, and it does include that person. So let's not think that it's all over for sales, home sales going forward. Let's keep on working at that, because I think we could still come back and rebound with a good year this year. And going forward, they don't project any year. Once we're through this V shape, they don't project any year over 8%. So I think that we're in a relatively good place. So now the question is, what should you do right now? The first thing I want you to remember is homeownership is an important source of wealth creation, enabling current homeowners and succeeding generations to move up the economic ladder. That's what the great thing. Almost every family's, the vast majority of every family's net worth is in their home. And when those homes get passed down generation to generation, that helps future generations build more net worth, more family wealth. So what we do for a living is not list and sell houses. We make dreams come true. We don't just mortgage homes. We mortgage a dream for them. And that's crucially important as we move forward in this, that we don't lose track of that we don't get caught up in all the things we can't do. I know there's a health crisis happening right now, but I doubt there's anyone listening to this recording that's going to come up with the coronavirus vaccine or a cure or even a treatment. So to us taking any time worrying about that, we should be aware of it. We should keep our families safe. We should pray and care for people that were and the families that were impacted by it. But let's not spend so much time there that we forget to do our job, because our job is the financial piece of this. If we allowed the pandemic, the health crisis, to be followed with a gigantic financial crisis, that's 2 hits to the stomach every consumer is going to have. Our job is to keep on moving on our side of it in any way we can. And I know there's one hand tied behind some of your backs and both hands are tied behind some of your backs. All right? In the environment we're living in right now. But this is what I also know. There's 3 ways, whether you're a mortgage broker or whether you're a real estate agent, there's 3 ways that you make money in this business. Number 1, you prospect for leads. Number 2, you nurture those leads by building relationships. And number 3, you close those leads. Now, number 3, the ability to close leads, that window's shutting rapidly. And I get that. But number 1 and number 2, we're sitting at home looking for something to do. We should be prospecting hard. We should be nurturing the leads that we get through that prospecting, not because we want to make a paycheck on the other end, but that we want to keep the economy going on the other end. That's all part of it. Don't be on Twitter and Facebook complaining about other people not doing their job. Let's just make sure we're doing our job. Because Ben Bernanke, in a report done in 2018, looking back at the mistakes that were made in 2008, said this: "My results do suggest that in the absence of the panic, the declines in employment, consumption, and output in early stages of the Great Recession would have been significantly less severe. If somehow we would have taken the panic out of that moment, job losses, goods purchased would have been significantly less severe." Understand that. Our job right now is to let this confusion and concern turn into panic and fear. Because then we're going to, again, have a much more difficult time financially when we're out of this. And the families, our neighbors, are going to have a much more difficult time. Now I want to pass it back over to David. He's going to have some suggestions to you, and he'll finish this out. Again, David, we're so lucky to have David on board. He's a calming influence in a very turbulent time, and he knows the ins and outs so much better than I do, or the team does, as far as the financial side of this whole thing.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. And, I was thinking about that Ben Bernanke quote that you just referenced. And the question is, instead of panic, what do you do? And I think the answer to that is differentiation. And Housing Wire wrote an article just a week or two ago, and it said, really addressed the question of how can you differentiate yourself during a pandemic? And the answer was by creating educational content that keeps your clients and prospects informed during these dark times. And so we've addressed those questions today. The questions that buyers and sellers, clients, people out in the market are just wondering how this is going to play out, how unemployment's going to affect things. And I think we can attack those and to your point, Steve, focus on what we can control and do what we can do to get the message out there. And I want to wrap up with a quote from Mark Davidson from 1000 Watt. And if you don't know Mark or 1000 Watt, he is an industry icon that works with some of the largest brands in our industry to help them position, communicate, and ultimately deliver the message that they're delivering to the market. And Mark says, turn your blog page into your home page. Work up a half dozen timely, relevant posts answering the most pressing questions consumers have. This is the content clients and people need more than home search or community info. So what's he saying there? Take this message and put it out in the market, whether it's a blog post, it's a video you're recording, it's a social post that you're putting out there. Because what people are getting right now is a piece of the story, not the full story. And so now more than ever, keeping current matters.
Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video and you found it informative, and now you have more information and know what is going on the market. I will continue updating you weekly, monthly with all the changes that are happening right now. And if there is anything that I can help you with, please reach out to me. You can call me or email me, whatever form of communication is preferred for you, text. I'm available. You can reach me at 404-886-0566, and my email address is juliarealtyatl@gmail.com. I'm wishing you to continue staying safe, healthy, to you, to your family, to everyone that you know. And we have Easter coming up. So I hope you have a wonderful and enjoyable time with people who matter to you. Please continue being blessed, and talk to you later. Bye-bye.